Strap yourselves in and hold on tight. This is the Power Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week my guest is an Olympian, a 13-time X-Gamer, and an all-around awesome person, Tricia Byrnes. Getting Tricia on the show took it all the way back to high school for me. I went to high school with this skater dude named John Casson. He was a little older than me, but my big memory of John was when him and his buddies brought over a quarter pipe to my house on a flatbed truck or something. I can't remember how it got there, but that's when I remember meeting John. From there, we have kept in touch as he has been killing it in the world of snowboarding while I was killing it behind my desk at K2. You haven't heard of John. He's a coach, and he's coached and worked with the best in the world. And while we've always kept in touch, we haven't seen each other since high school. And when he emailed over and suggested I podcast with Tricia Byrnes, it was a pleasant surprise that came out of the blue, and it reminded me that I haven't had a woman on in a while because I suck. So the email was perfect timing, and I caught up with Tricia while I was in Portland. I'm glad I did, as she's a cool person with a ton of history. Before I get into it, I want to ask you to follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement, subscribe to my podcast on whatever platform you listen to me on, tell your friends about the show, and support my amazing sponsors. They are Evo, Spy Optic, Stanley, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Now, let's talk to Tricia Byrnes. I was doing some research on you because that's what I do with these podcasts. And I think not the most interesting, because there's a lot of interesting things about you, but from the get-go, your family has an uncomfortable last name in Byrnes, and when your dad's name is Dick, and you have Dick Byrnes, are there any great Dick Byrnes stories?
Like the name or the...
The name, like, hey, you calling somewhere, hey, is Dick Byrnes there?
Well, there's a couple things that are funny. That for sure. That didn't happen with us, but so my brother was a couple years older than me, and my dad was an artist, and he did like a lot of nudes. We lived in a big house in Connecticut growing up, and there were a lot of like huge nude sculptures, and the teenage boys growing up in our neighborhood and in our town were just like the Dick Byrnes jokes for sure. And he would like write his name like at the mountain on the back of his backpack. It would be like Dick Byrnes. Like, I don't know how it missed him because he was a very smart, witty guy, but it just didn't mean the same thing. Maybe no one named their kid Dick now. Not nobody, but
yes,
right?
If your last name's Byrnes.
100%, yeah. But there was a lot of teenage boys giggling in our household.
I can imagine. And then for you being Tricia Byrnes, it just makes me think of smoking weed. And did you get a lot of that growing up? Like, Tricia Byrnes.
Oh, it's so funny. No, never. And my brother's name was Doug, so he got a lot of like rug burn jokes or something like that. But no, never once. And I didn't smoke weed, but my eyes are always a little bit red. So people are always like, your sister's such a stoner. He's like, no, she's not. She's a square.
Speaking of swear, I guess we should talk about drugs and alcohol in your career now. None of them? Do you drink, party at all during your pro snowboard career?
I was always kind of square. I definitely like drank, but not...
You didn't send it?
I didn't send it that hard. I mean, definitely there were days for sure.
You weren't going big every Friday night?
Yeah, or like your traditional snowboard sender.
Okay.
I'm so boring.
It is what it is. I mean, there's a reason you were able to do so well, and if you were partying every night, you probably wouldn't have done as well as you did. Although some people can do that.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like I grew up in that community of people that were in the old school days in Vermont, like the US Open at the early days. It's like people were rolling in hammered and wasted, the morning of the half pipe or whatnot. But I don't know, it always kind of like scared me a little bit. So I didn't want to be in that state.
Now living in Portland, you get to see people in that state all the time when you walk out your door.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it really is crazy. Seattle's the same way. But we don't need to talk about all the homeless people in Portland and Seattle. We'll talk about growing up rich in Connecticut. You said you grew up in a big house. I think you had 5 people in your family, so it's a lot of mouths to feed.
Yeah.
Dad was an artist, and was it just sculpture art?
Oh, no. So my dad was like an artist by passion, and he did everything like oil painting, printing, like sculpture, whatnot. But he made his money doing educational way back film strips that turned into like DVDs, videos, and then he sold his business to Random House in the 90s maybe.
Oh, wow.
So my family's like really big, the youngest of 5, and my oldest brother's like 20 years older than me. So there's a huge ass spread. And I think when we moved to Connecticut, which is before I was born, they were like, what are you doing? That house is huge. How are you going to pay for it? Like it was in the 70s. So it was like oil crisis time. And my dad kept it cold.
With 5 people, a mansion that might be hard to pay for.
A mansion.
I'm just going to call it a mansion, right? You say it's a big house, 5 people. I call it a mansion. Was it country club life growing up? Was life pretty easy?
Yeah.
That's good. I mean, it's so much better to be rich than poor.
I grew up in Greenwich, Connecticut, which is a very wealthy town. So we did not feel wealthy. It's like we had friends that owned the polo fields and like had polo ponies and everybody got a brand new car on their 16th birthday where like we did not get that. So we felt like middle class.
You guys were driving the E-Class when everybody else was driving the S-Class.
And then I went to college in Vermont and I was like, whoa, crazy. It really like blew my mind, the level of like abundance and wealth.
Yeah, I guess when you live in a bubble, you don't see it until you go somewhere else and you realize everybody doesn't have this.
You think you do, and you're like, I know that not everyone goes to college, and I know that not everyone has all this, and I have friends that have way, way more. So we knew the feeling of like lack or whatever. Mm-hmm. But it was a good way to grow up, and I am super grateful, and I had an awesome childhood.
Is it true that when you were a child, at like 6 years old, you said you wanted to be an Olympian?
I was probably like 8 or 10. That is true. Like I remember watching gymnastics and swimming and I'm like, I missed my window. Like, I was like, damn it. Why did my parents put me in gymnastics at 3, you know? And I really did. I was like totally in love with the Olympic movement and the dream and the music and like all the fanfare that they make on TV for the, you know, Olympic stories. But I definitely was like, well, you're too old for that.
What sports were you into when you were a kid?
We were a big swimming family, so I grew up swimming from the time I was like 5, but I had to work really hard at it, and I wasn't Olympic material.
Is swimming fun? I did swim team for like 2 days. They made me swim for like 4 hours, and I was like, this sucks.
Yeah, it's like what everyone in our town did and at our country club, and my family was like big into that, so I enjoyed it, the community of it. There's sort of like a meditative quality that is cool, but once I graduated high school, I really haven't gone back to the swimming laps ever.
I think you get into skiing a little bit later than most, 10 years oldish.
So I learned to ski when I was like 4 on like a couple weekends with my best friend going up to Vermont. And then my dad, we went on a ski vacation at Stratton Mountain in Vermont and it was like pissing rain and miserable. And my dad fell in love with skiing and he's like, we're doing it. So then in the next couple months, he bought a house at Stratton and we went every single weekend. And so I was probably 8 and that was still like early days for Burton Snowboards at Stratton. So I just got to see it all like right there.
And this is all the early 80s.
This is like 83.
Snowboarding's about to start at that point. I mean, there's probably a couple pockets of like dudes doing shit out of their garage at that point. But
yeah, by 87 at Stratton, it felt like you were seeing it on the mountain. And it wasn't like, what is that thing? It felt like there was a posse of people, maybe 10. And I don't remember a time when Burton wasn't in my life in that way of like seeing it in the periphery at least. Because the US Open at Stratton, like I remember the 1987 Open. So that was pretty shortly after that.
And is that the one before you competed in?
Yeah, like I watched that, or maybe it was 88. Yeah, 88. My brother competed in it, and I remember being on the sidelines, and I was like, damn, I want to do this. And then 89, I was competing.
Now, are you still skiing when you see your brother compete, and then you switch over? Because him and his friends have all started snowboarding at that point, and they are like the faces of snowboarding at Stratton. Are you pretty much chasing them around on your skis, and they're like, hey, you should get on a snowboard at some point?
You're a loser. Yeah, I mean, the boards were not built for 7th graders.
2x4s that don't flex.
Yeah, that
no side
like
cut.
A high back that goes up to your thigh. Like boots that don't fit. I wasn't really following them around, but then I wanted to be following them around. So I like hiked, like you couldn't get on the lift without, you had to get certified at those times.
Yep.
So I spent a lot of time hiking and eating shit on the bunny hill. And then by 88, then I sort of joined a program. They had just started a program with that like posse of guys at Stratton. And so there was another girl there, Beth Trombley, who was a snowboarder. And we kind of locked eyes in the lodge and were like, hey, are you going to do this thing? And so the 2 of us joined with those guys. And then we literally just chased them around for the next 4 years or whatever.
And I think your family does like a Breck trip at that point, too, that helps solidify snowboarding as well. Your brother's in the World Championships at Breck that year.
Yeah, 88.
Is that the second year of that World Championships?
I think so. I was definitely skiing with my family at that time. I saw the Breck and then I saw the US Open and I'm like, I want a piece of this. It looked so cool. That was like the Sean Palmer it felt so wild and cool.
And you're not wild and cool.
I'm not, but I wanted to try to be. It just felt different. And like in a town like Connecticut where I didn't feel 100% like I'm with these people, you know, like preppy. Like we were a little bit of oddballs in that town, like an artist family, not like a working in Manhattan on Wall Street family. Like we were a little bit different. So it just felt like this was my different calling.
So you do the Breck trip, you come back and you decide to switch over. I think that's when you get back, you're like, I'm making the switch here pretty much now. The learning curve for snowboarding back then is ridiculously hard, I feel like, because the gear sucks so bad.
Yeah.
Your first couple days, your gloves must weigh 30 pounds just because they're so wet and you're just so unhappy. How long does it take you to figure out how to turn them?
It took me a year, probably. So you had to go get certified. And so you'd have to go to like the ski school and be like, hi, I'd like to try to show you that I can turn this tank of a snowboard. They're like, great, that'll be $20 or whatever, $5. So then you go up on the hill with this instructor and then you show them that you can turn. Well, it took me like 5 tries. They're like, I'm sorry, you're not good enough. You'll have to come back another time. And which is like every weekend at that point. So like I spent probably that whole spring going up, like practicing, thinking I'm good enough, and then like eating shit when I got off the lift with the guy. But eventually I got it. And then once it clicked, I mean, it's like anyone who snowboards, like, oh, once you can like a turn, then you can kind of figure it out and you just like kick it around and you're good. But it took a little while.
Your brother at that point, is he laughing at you for not passing these tests?
My brother and his friends were just like to like heckle and tease their little sister. But we had like a really good relationship. But, you know, especially when the other guys were around, I definitely got a good hazing.
As you should. I think that's what happens with siblings.
It's healthy.
What's your first snowboard?
My first snowboard was a hand-me-down. It was like a 150 Elite Burton Performer. I had combat boots because it was like so hilarious. And then some weird fluorescent O'Neill jacket and, you know, whatever. Headbands.
You were part of that crew that did everything. You raced, you did the half pipe, you did everything. Did you also have a bomber set up where you're in hard boots and a carving board?
Eventually. So like when we started snowboarding, like you said, we did every single thing, like GS slalom, but we did it all in soft boots. Okay. And then as that sort of evolved, that was like 89, 90, 91, I probably got on hard boots for a year or two. I like to be like no frills or just kind of low maintenance. And it felt like a lot of maintenance, like boards, boots, another pair, like all that stuff.
It might as well be skiing at that point.
Exactly.
Some people switch over to snowboarding, especially back then, because skiing was uncomfortable to them. They could never get comfortable in their gear. And they'd switch to snowboarding and be like, oh, these soft boots, it's so much fun, it's so different. And then you see dudes out there in ski boots on a snowboard with their angles like so ridiculously high. It just looks crazy to me.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, even now, there's like still those like pockets of carving posses. In Aspen, they have like this posse that goes up, but it's crazy. Yeah, it still looks super uncomfortable.
It's cool to see them almost carve a circle sometimes, but at the same time, I don't need to do that ever.
Yeah.
So you saw that open. You said you were going to become a snowboarder, and then you end up getting into the open when you were 14 years old.
Yeah.
It's 1989, and everybody in the world, snowboard-wise, comes to Vermont for the U.S. Open. You're a 14-year-old kid that no one knows who you are anyway at that point. But is that nerve-wracking, or does it even matter to you? Is it just like a contest you're going to try?
No, it felt so huge. It's all the people in the magazines that you look at and you see like Chris Roach or like all of these people coming from California. Like all that stuff felt really huge back then.
Who were your heroes back then?
I definitely liked Chris Roach. Like I watched a lot of the All Is Quiet on the Western Front.
Skate style guys?
Yeah. And Noah Brandon, like Brushy, women like Tina Bassage. I'm trying to think like way back then. Jean Higgins. I remember all those girls. But yeah, it was just awesome to see them roll into this tiny, tiny Vermont mountain town and kind of take over. And it felt really, really cool. So it was cool to be a part of it. And you also feel like you're invisible. But then looking back, you know, you're like, the scene was so small. Of course, people like noticed you in it. But yeah, it was so cool to be a part of it. Because it was like such a big week in our lives, like the year before, like watching or the couple of years before, that it felt cool to actually participate in it.
Well, it's fun living in the place where snowboarding Super Bowl is, and you're just like there for the whole week, and you can kind of get into where you can get into and see what you can see. Yeah. So it has to be super exciting. That first year, I don't know how you did. You didn't win. I know that. You probably did okay in that contest. But it opens your eyes, I think, to the world of what snowboarding can be at 14. Like, holy shit, this is crazy.
Yeah.
Are you a total grom at this time too? Are you totally fanning out when you see these people?
Not like fanning out in the way I think kids fan out now, but internally, yes, but externally trying to just be like, it's cool, whatever.
And then you go back from these snowboard contests, or that one, that's your first big contest. You go back to school, you're 15 years old, you're a freshman or sophomore in high school. What kind of kid are you? Are you like outgoing when you're snowboarding and quiet when you're in school? Or are you constantly the life of the party? Who are you?
I'm not the life of the party. I'm definitely kind of quiet in high school, but like with my friends, funny and my own thing. But just like what I loved about snowboarding was that it made me forget all of the like trappings of being a teenager where you're like awkward or like overthinking stuff. And when you're snowboarding with everyone, you're just out there kind of like doing it and learning and falling and getting up, and you feel sort of like protected by the guise of being in snowboard gear on the hill. So I guess I brought some of that back. It's hard to know like who you were, because I feel like people say stuff to me now about like how I was in high school. I'm like, oh, well, on the inside, I felt like I was completely like shy and hiding and trying to be invisible. But they're like, oh, you're always like super outgoing and friendly and like, you know, whatever. So I don't know if I can like answer that with the good answer.
All right, we'll leave it at that. One thing that I think you did do, which a lot of kids do today, and they did back then, is they put together sponsor me packages. I don't know if they were tapes back then, like VHS to VHS, or letters, because it was probably pretty early for you because you're old. It's all right. I'm old as well. Burton, they own the East Coast. Yeah. They are the snowboard brand for East Coast. They call it Burton boarding there, right?
Yeah. They're like, are you going Burtonin? You're like, what? Burton boarding?
That's just so crazy that they were calling the sport Burtoning. But you, being a Stratton local who should be on Burton based on your location, you send stuff to Sims and they end up hooking you up. Is that the first hookup you got?
I mean, we were just so enamored with that like West Coast vibe. It was just weird because like we had a lot of East Coast pride, but we felt like really akin to Sims. And so, yeah, I sent a sponsor me letter. No video, no nothing. I think I stapled together a bunch of results from the Green Mountain series and wrote like, Dear Sims, please throw me some swag. I remember, I think I still have it, my like letter that I got back from Mickey Keller. I was like, we're proud to welcome you to the Sims team. And it felt huge. Like, you know, those things are bigger than like winning huge events later in your career. That first like changing point, like, oh my gosh, I think I can do it and someone else does too. But yeah, I got like boards and an outfit, and then I got a travel budget. Like, it was crazy.
And you're 15, 16 years old at that point? So what do your parents say to that? Because they're artists, they're probably like fully supportive of like, hey, this is a path you can take.
Yeah, I mean, they're just like, cool. I mean, my parents were paying for everything anyway. Like, so they're like, travel budget. I was like, yay, spending cash. It was awesome. But I really appreciated that my parents, they were invested in our endeavors, but it was never their thing. So they supported it, but I don't even remember them being like, oh, wow.
Excited?
Yeah, I'm sure they were excited, but I don't know. I just feel like nowadays parents are so involved in the career of their kids at such a young age. I don't remember that. I remember more like my brother and our friends sort of like, dude, Sims wrote you back.
Mm-hmm. Have you had to work with parents who have kids that are going to be the next great thing? And you have to kind of see the relationship between them. And
yes,
sometimes it's good. And sometimes you're like, God, they're like a super mom.
Yeah. Or just the time that we had in snowboarding in those like late 80s, early 90s, even into the 2000s, like it was really our thing. After 2002, I feel like that's when you saw the trickle-in effect of parents shaping and pushing and wanting and like negotiating for their kids before they're even successful, all in potential. And it just like changed the connection to the actual like sport or lifestyle of snowboarding with the kid.
That kind of brings in more of a jock type mentality if you're pushing a kid at a young age. I mean, it should be something the kid wants to do, and then it evolves from there. Yeah,
like the self-motivation becomes sort of watered or murkied with parental motivation, and then you're like, don't even know what you want.
You're trying to make your parents proud instead of just have fun snowboarding?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Now it is time for me to take a quick sponsor break. My first sponsor is Evo, and if you haven't been to Evo stores in Seattle, Portland, Denver, or Whistler, or visited their website, evo.com, you are missing out on the best deals in action sports and beyond. Evo has something for everyone in the family, and they always have a great sale going on. They carry all the best brands in bike, surf, skate, wake, ski, and snowboard, and have all the clothing and outerwear you'll need for your adventure, or just to look great when it's time to head back to school or the bar. Right now, you can find some great end-of-season deals on bikes and surfboards, and check out all the new ski and snowboarding gear that's hitting the floor daily over at Evo. Evo offers free shipping on orders over $50, a low price guarantee, and a no-hassle return policy. Please support the show by buying everything you need from Evo. My next sponsor is Stanley, another iconic Seattle brand that has been ahead of the curve since 1913. While we all know Stanley for creating that iconic green bottle that kept your grandpa's coffee hot all day long, they still do that and a lot more these days. They still are all about adventure. They still are all about keeping your beverages hotter or colder than any other product ever created. And they have always been the right choice when it comes to the planet. If you are still using single-use plastics for your beverages, it's time to make a change for the environment. And now I'm making it easier than ever to do that. You can save 30% on all Stanley products when you head on over to stanley-pmi.com, buy some stuff. When you check out, enter the code TPM30. That's all one word, no spaces, and you're done. I should also mention that when you buy from Stanley, you are also supporting cool projects like this podcast and the new movie from Matchsticks Productions. Those are my sponsors. You're competing a whole bunch through that Green Mountain series. All the guys and girls in New England did that back then. 1992 rolls around for you. You're a senior in high school. You've done the Open a few times. I don't know what your best result is so far, but it doesn't really matter because at that Open, you go there and you win it at 17 years old, and that has to be like the highlight of your life, I think, when you look back at it. Yeah,
for sure. Like definitely one of the highlights. Because you're always feeling like an underdog. I think the year before I got fourth, and that felt really like, oh.
It's the worst, right?
Yeah, like, or the best. Because then I got super motivated, and I was like, A, it's attainable, and B, I really want it. And you can stop pretending. It's cool. When you get kind of close, you're like, oh, I really do want that. And then winning the Open, it was a total surprise. It wasn't like, oh, yeah, I feel like I won that contest. I remember like one of the judges came over and was like, you won. I'm like, no. They haven't announced it, and that's ridiculous. But then it opened the concept and the idea that I could compete at this level with these women on like a world stage, and that I could go pro or travel the world and kind of like take it to the next level. I was going to college, so I was like, I don't want to go to college. I want to go be a pro snowboarder. And that was like a big conversation with my parents.
Did your parents make you go to college at that point?
We had a deal. My mother really wanted me to go. I really wanted to just like go snowboarding. And so I was like, I'll go for one semester and then we'll negotiate. And then I went for one semester. I was like, college is awesome. I love this place. And I met like four of my very best friends within the first like 10 minutes of being there. And so it was really awesome. I'm glad I went. But I definitely remember being like, you can pick where I go. I don't care.
You went to a small private school, St. Michael's College, I think. You do that in 4 years. At that point, you've got that U.S. Open win under your belt. A ton of opportunities have opened up for you. I mean, I don't know if you're still on Sims at that point.
Rosignol.
Yeah, because people want to throw money at you because you are arguably one of the best women in the world, and they want to be associated with that. But then you have college, and this whole stupid college thing gets in the way. Are you still able to go on trips and do your snowboard stuff while you're in school?
Yeah, so I figured out how to just take all my exams early into early December, and then at that time, there wasn't so much of the off-season early, like trips to South Bay and all that. So I just focused on school from September till early December, and then I would start traveling on the World Cup. But it was such a nice balance to have between focusing so much on snowboarding and then also coming back to a life that didn't have really that much in it. Like there was definitely a big scene like Pat Bridges and Mark Sullivan, and Burton had moved to Burlington at that point. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of East Coast snowboarding happening in Burlington at the time. And so it didn't feel like I was so far removed from it, but it did feel like I had a world outside of snowboarding, which was a nice balance for me.
It's a Catholic school, I believe. And you grew up religious? Is that why you end up at a Catholic school?
I did grow up in a Catholic family and went to church every Sunday, but I ended up at that school because that girl, Beth Trombley, who I met at Stratton in the early days, she went there. There was a bunch of snowboarders going to that school at that time.
Okay.
I'm sure it ticked a nice big box for my mom to go to a Catholic school, but it didn't feel very Catholic.
You didn't have to wear a uniform?
No.
Okay, just checking. So you get on Rossi. I've talked to a ton of people about Rossi because I really think it's funny in the snowboard world. I look at Rosignol as a ski heritage brand.
100%.
Yeah, and they're great in the ski world. In the snowboard world, they've had the best teams ever. If you just look at their athlete rosters over the years, they have the best snowboard teams, and no one cares about their snowboards, and no one even thinks they have a good team because they don't market it. Did you feel that way back then?
Rossi felt cool, but
You're a snowboarder. How does it feel cool when you've got like a rooster on your beanie?
Yeah, right. And their boards, they made like corncob board. It felt very, very, very French. Or Tin Man, the recycler. Yeah, so Dave Siona, he kind of kicked that program off. Does that sound right?
With Rossi?
Yeah.
It makes sense.
It's funny because it felt very East Coast and small, and then there was a lot of cool people on it, and they were doing cool stuff. I didn't have the perspective to look at it in this like huge way, but also K2 is one of my first snowboards that I rode on, the K2 gyrator. And so like ski brands were so like mixed into the snowboarding world at that time.
But you coming from the East Coast, was there a ski snowboard rivalry? Because I think on the West Coast there wasn't as much of one as there was maybe in New England and the Jersey area of like skiers and snowboarders not getting along. Like, did you see fights on the hill growing up?
I never saw fights on the hill growing up, but it definitely felt like you don't belong here. A lot of looks from skiers are like, ugh, what are you doing? You're scraping off all of our moguls. A lot of like snappy, snippy comments, but never like fistfights, brawls, or anything like that. And sort of like, you guys can have this trail. They had trails that were like banned to snowboarders at Stratton and just like all that stuff. I didn't feel like there was a big rivalry. We just like felt like we were much cooler than them.
You feel like you're cooler than them, and they probably feel like they're cooler than you because they're skiers. But then you're a snowboarder on their like sacred ski brand. Did that have any effect on them at all? It's like, hey, I'm on Rossignol.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember that.
With school, you end up majoring in psychology and English. What is the plan? What do you want to do with life if snowboarding doesn't pan out?
Plan was just like enjoy college. It was the first time I felt like you can pick whatever you want, study whatever you want to do, and like create your own education. And I loved being like taught stuff. Yeah, I didn't really have a plan, and I still don't.
Well, it seems to be working out. You've got a lovely house here.
Thank you.
You finished college. You have some sponsors. This is going to allow you to start really traveling because school is done. Who is paying you, and what happens when you get out of school?
I had to stay like an extra semester because I was a little bit short. So I stayed living in Burlington. I had a good scene there and good friends. And then I was writing for Rossi and for, I think, Wave Rave, but was Minx. I had a bunch of like Smith, like fun, cool, hip sponsors at the time. And I was just traveling and just kind of doing my thing, competing, but living in the East Coast. And then the Olympic idea kind of came on the scene in like 96, 94, 95. And so all of a sudden everything sort of like shifted into that mode and like, well, you're already competing in half pipe and that's what's going to go to the Olympics. So then it just sort of everything went in that direction and sponsors started appearing a little bit more in that direction and eyes came onto the sport in a new way.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing because you can look at the soul of the sport is maybe not the Olympic rider. It's the dude out riding powder and finding new lines and just having fun on his snowboard. And that's a dude that was getting paid for a long time. Contest guys are getting paid as well. But when the Olympics come around, every brand has to relook at their budgets. And they have to say, hey, we need someone who's going to podium at the Olympics. And we're going to have to carve out some money for them. And it turns out that the Olympic athletes are going to get the lion's share of the money these days because if you're going to afford an Olympic athlete, they're pretty expensive going through agents these days.
I think before the Olympics in snowboarding, it was so uncertain if it was cool, if it was good, if it was right for the sport.
Yep.
And the brands, they weren't as focused on that elite Olympic athlete money. It was sort of like, are we or aren't we? I felt like a lot of the brands, they're not entirely sold on the mission. And so they weren't that focused on it. Like you kind of felt like weirdos wanting to go to the Olympics.
Yeah, well, at the time that the Olympics were brought up, it was a very polarizing thing in snowboarding. It was two sides of the fence. You had the Terrier side of the world where it's, hey, are we going to... Did I say his name right? I always say it wrong and then people email me.
It's like Terrier Hawkinson or people say Terrier.
So you have two schools of thought there. You have Terrier on one side saying the Olympics are everything that's wrong with snowboarding or that's going to be everything that's wrong with snowboarding. And then you have your side of the fence, which you've always wanted to be an Olympian. The Olympics are coming up. It's like, fuck yeah, I'm going to do this. Do you feel like you're kind of on the other side of the fence of most snowboarders when it first starts and you're excited for it?
No, because I don't think I was like, fuck yeah, I'm going to do this. I was like, I really want to do this, but I know it's not that cool. You definitely feel conflicted, just like putting your stake in the ground on anything. Some people are cool with like polarizing people, but I don't know if that's where it was at that time. And so I wanted to go for it. And it was kind of the natural path that we were going, but also felt like it wasn't going to make or break your career if you did or didn't go. Like we're now, there is definitely a defined line in the sand if you go to the Olympics or not. I think as a competitor athlete, not as a snowboarder in general, but if you're going that path and you're like not making that cut, it kind of defines it. Where back then it was like the Open was still way bigger than the Olympics, and the X Games had just started in 96 or something.
Yeah. Before the Olympics even come around, you have the X Games that start. And we're not going to talk too much about the X Games because we don't really have too much to talk about them, really, because if you look at the X Games, you went for 13 years in a row, I feel like.
Oh my God, yeah.
That's a lot of years in a row. You do slope and pipe 1 year, and then it's all half pipe after that. And I think your best finish is like 6th or 4th. Is that something you think about still? Like, fuck, I never got on the podium.
No, I always laugh about it because I'm like, if you have 13 tries to do something well, you skunk it 13 times. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, because you can win contests. You've proven you can win contests everywhere. But the X Games is always been elusive to you. And I mean, every year when you get there after year 10, are you like, this is my year? Or does it get in your head like, I don't do good at this contest?
I mean, every run's a different run, right? But you're definitely like, no surprise here at the end of the week, you know? Yeah. But the X Games was never like it. Now it's like the pristine, like really great event. But in the early days, it was like Snow Summit. It was not the best contest ever. Not to say that I couldn't have done well at it. But they used to put like rails in the half pipe where I'm like, I do not want to hit a rail. So it's like always a little bit like variety and just mix and match. But no, it didn't get me down, but I definitely did make note of it. And
then the Olympics, they're coming around and you have to focus. What does it take for you to make that first Olympic team, which you don't make?
So 98, I went for the Olympic team. I got second at like one of the qualifiers. It felt like I was like hot in the running.
And everybody thought you were going to make this team, I would think, at that point.
Yeah. But there's a depth of talent in the U.S., like always.
Every year.
Every year. It's crazy. And crazy stuff happens at the Olympics, not just in snowboarding. People who win the Olympics, like Esther Ledecky, winning a skiing and people come out of the nowheres and like win gold medals. So it feels like it's this freaky event anyway. But then also in 98, it was like every single run you took that winter counted. Like 2 runs combined was how you won events. It's so crazy now. It's best of format in competing. And also they give you 5 events and they count 3. You like look back at that and you're like, oh my gosh, like every run and trick and move counted for the Olympics. But yeah, I didn't make it. It was devastating, kind of like that 4th place finish in like the 91 US Open or something. But it totally like lit that fire and was like, no, I really want to go to the Olympics. Because it did feel like that, like, oh, it's not that cool, but like you want to go. And then not making it really was like, no, this is something I totally want to be a part of.
For what you do in snowboarding, for competing in the half pipe, that's where you belong, is at the Olympics, once they put it in there. Because the Olympics were dying before they put snowboarding in there. I mean, it was a cash grab for them. They're like, how can we get youth interested in our lame-ass event? And they bring in snowboarding, and it worked. Then they bring in skiing. Now they're getting skateboarding and surfing. And soon, all those classic Olympic events that people don't watch, they're going to be done.
I know. It's crazy.
It's a totally different world now, and it's cool to see. But it's also interesting to see the sports getting sold out once every 4 years.
It changes the entire pulse of the sport. It's all about that Olympic shine, the quad, the 4-year cycle. It's not, not to say that there aren't pieces of those sports, but as like a competitor, it just puts all this focus, and then everyone's peaking at the same time, dipping off at the same time, retiring at the same time. Like there's none of this lifestyle cycle to it. It's all geared around the machine of the Olympics, which is its own shit show.
Yeah, probably the most corrupt organization in sports next to soccer. Does it hurt your confidence at all when you don't make the Olympics, or you kind of just shrug it off and like,
No, I definitely was like devastated. I also think because I wasn't honest with myself and the fact that I really wanted to go. And so when I didn't make it, it was really hard. And I didn't quite realize how big the Olympics were. My parents did a good job of kind of not putting their like hopes on it for me. But then once I didn't make it, I realized like how many people that were like friends with my parents or whatever were like, oh, like too bad about this or that. And I'm like, whoa, why is everyone so invested? But it was good too, because it brought it right back to snowboarding. And it was interesting to see what happened in the industry, because like right that spring, I like lost all my sponsors. They're like, it's not because you didn't make the team, but we're cutting you. And you're like, okay, so that's a weird message.
Yeah. Like, just tell me the real reason. I get it.
Just say you didn't make it and we have to cut you.
You don't make the team, that's going to put you in bad spirits. Then you get cut by all your sponsors. Then I think the next summer you lose your brother, who's like your best friend. Where are you headspace after that? Because 3 bad things in a row, and then the last one's like your whole life.
Yeah. I didn't make the Olympic team, and I lost my sponsors. But then Peter Carlisle, who runs Octagon, an agency, he was like, I want to pick you up. I think we can do something with you. So I get an agent after losing all my sponsors. He's like, let's rebuild this. And then a couple months later, the U.S. team calls and is like, hey, we want to fully fund you and put you on the U.S. snowboard team. Before I'm like, U.S. snowboard team, not that cool because it's all tied up in that FIS ISF stuff. But then when you're like, I have no options and no sponsors, fuck yeah. I would love to join. Oh, you're going to give me per diem? That sounds great. So that like shifted. And then in a way from like 98 to 99 was like one of my most amazing years because I think all the weight was off and it just was about snowboarding and having fun. And like, yeah, you didn't make the team. Worst case scenario, you didn't make the Olympics. Like, all right, still here, still love it. It kind of redefined all the motivation and it was so fun. And then that following summer, I felt like, yeah, like things were like really in this good space. And then I get a phone call and it's like, your brother died from the cops. So it was just a lot of up and down. It was crazy.
When that happens, do you kind of look at snowboarding and everything else and push that aside for a year and just focus on family and getting your mental state back? Or do you just jump right back in and like, I'm just going to do this for Doug?
No, it was crazy. I felt like the minute that my brother died, I was like, I knew it. Not like I knew that he was dying that day or something, but I just felt in my, and maybe this is just hindsight talking, but like I really felt growing up, I was always like worried for him or just I felt this like fear of losing him. And then when it happens, you're like, this is not how I thought I would feel. You know how you like prepare for something and then it happens and you're like, well, all that preparation got me nowhere. Like this is actually how I feel and actually I'm going to move forward. When he died, I just felt like bummed, obviously brokenhearted for that moment of what? Like, this is not the life I thought we were going to live. Like, I had all these plans of like growing old together and like ... right? Then I just like instantly was like, this is the reality. And how lucky have I been to have him as my brother and like the community and snowboarding, like all that stuff, like all these friends, when they came to the funeral, just this outpouring of all these hooligan dudes and people that are our family and our community. I felt so grateful for that it really just made me want to live my life. It just got so refined or this is what it's about. Not like I need time to recover or like wallow in the past. I was like, let's do this. Life is short or it can be. And let's do all the fun shit we can do now. And not in a reckless way, just appreciative and sort of let's do it.
Then you're square away.
Yeah.
Does that just light you on fire for trying to make the team in 2002 and everything with snowboarding?
Yeah, or it just like puts everything in perspective because you're like, nothing really fucking matters at the end of the day. Like 1 minute here, 1 minute you're gone and do all the right things, say what you need to say and chase the dreams and however they fall, it's fine, but just get after it.
So you get through that, and then I think you start picking up more sponsors again. It's like you get to the bottom of everything and start moving back up, and who starts paying you again?
Yeah, who starts paying me?
Lamar? I already know your answer. I mean...
Yeah, so I was working with Peter Carlisle, and he had just a small, like, little agency, and so he went out and hunted down some sponsors, which was great, because I had exhausted the resources I had in my small network at the time. And yeah, I wrote for Lamar, and that was an interesting journey because they had just like shifted hands and were like in Canada and, you know, Burt Lamar was no longer part of it.
I think they ended up at Sports Authority at some point.
Yeah, I'm sure, dude. It's crazy. All the sponsors I had at that time, I wrote for like Xnix, which is like some Japanese, right? Yeah, Japanese outerwear company that sponsored the team. I just got to focus on snowboarding and competition snowboarding wasn't cool. So it's just like, just do your thing, have fun, travel the world, have fun. Yeah.
Now it is time for me to get into my final set of sponsors, and I'm going to start with Spy Optic. Spy has spent the past 25 years innovating the sunglass game, but more importantly, they've spent 25 years making you look good. The artists, athletes, and designers over at Spy not only live and breathe the action sports lifestyle, they like to party and try new things. And the newest of new is the 50/50 collection. Spy took the iconic frames, the Flynn, Discord, Cyrus, and Helm, and took their bottoms off. Literally. They stripped down these popular frames, leaving them semi-rimless and ready for some action. It's an awesome upgrade to the glasses I already love. And if you wear sunglasses and listen to this podcast, support me, save some money, and make yourself look good by heading over to Spy Optic, pick out some sunglasses. I highly recommend the Helm 50/50. Head to checkout and save 20% by entering the code POWEL20. That's all one word and the number 20. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. They have been brewing my favorite Northwest beer since 2006, and they have a couple of new flavors that I'm going to tell you about. The first is Profuse Juice, a hazy IPA that kind of reminds me of Out of Office. It's got a great flavor, and a percentage of sales benefit the Surfrider Foundation. The second beer, Smash, is a lighter wheat ale that I drank a ton of while I was in Bend. You can't go wrong with either of these beers, and they're great to drink outside. And 10 Barrel is all about drinking beer outside and supporting all things snow. You can find out a lot more about the company and the beer over at Fully Aligned. That's 10 Barrel's brand new podcast that lets you peek behind the curtain over at 10 Barrel. Next time you're at the store, buy some 10 Barrel and support the brand that really makes a difference in the sports we love, the 10 Barrel Brewery. Those are my sponsors. Now we are going to get back into the podcast. With Octagon, you actually come in-house with them and become like an athlete agent. At some point in your career, you become the elder statesman of all the athletes because you were competing for 20 years.
Yeah.
Are there any women that have that kind of lengthy career?
Kelly Clark.
Does she have 20 full years?
I don't know. Maybe not.
Maybe. I don't know.
19.
But yeah, so you have been there forever. You're the one that can offer guidance, and you're also the one that can pick out the talent and realize who's going to maximize stuff for different brands. Who are you able to sign as athletes?
When I started, I came on as a client manager in 2006 with Octagon, and I was kind of looking for young kids, but I didn't sign anyone too amazing now, like in hindsight, but that sounds really bad. Like I'm shit talking.
Not everybody can be great.
No, but it was like this younger crew, Lizzie Bierman, Brock Waring, Kimi Fasani. I was working with her. She's amazing.
She's made it, yeah.
Yeah. I didn't discover her by any means, but I was working with her. And then just like working with like Kelly and Seth Westcott. They were already on Octagon, but just sort of like adding support where needed. But yeah, it was an interesting learning experience to go from like athlete represented by an agency to athlete / representing athletes.
It makes you think about everything in a different light, I would think.
Yeah, almost a little bit heartbreaking. You're like looking behind the curtain at Oz or something where you're like, oh, this is how people talk about you.
They're horses.
Yeah, in my career, like I knew we're marketing tools. Like if you're not selling product, how can they justify having you? Yes, you're great. Yes, they love you. Yes, all these things. But really, it's a business, dollars, cents, right? But then when you look at the back end and you're like, oh, this is how much they paid this person, this person, this person, all from like, say, Monster or something. And what they all look like from the front is that they're all getting paid a lot. And then you realize behind the curtain, they're making like 10 grand, and there's one person making a ton, but it doesn't necessarily reflect the talent on the out front. It's just the deal they got. And at the time, at the marketing budget, I mean, you know, all that stuff, but it's really fascinating when you come from like the athlete to the other side.
And then you can see what the athletes aren't doing too. I mean, especially nowadays with social media, but you know, it's like, hey, you want this, but you're not doing shit. Yeah, you're writing, but that's what you do.
Yeah, totally. The social media angle was sort of just peering its head and everyone's like, whatever. I'm like, oh, it's going to be a crazy world. And now you look at brands and they work with influencers instead of athletes.
Crazy.
It's gnarly.
But we'll get back to your snowboarding because we haven't gotten through your career at all. No, I did it. I think I took us on that detour and I do that all the time. You're gearing up for the 2002 Olympics. They are in the U.S. this time. They're in Salt Lake City. I know this whole country, everybody's getting super excited. I think it comes down to you and Gretchen Bleiler, and you are really good friends with Gretchen as well. And you end up getting into the Olympics. How does it all play out?
Qualifying for the 2002 Olympics was probably the gnarliest experience because there were 3 slots and 4 qualified women to go. And the 3 of us had earned the spots, like, because you had to go on the FIS tour and compete at all these crappy events to earn them. So one of us was basically like giving up a spot to Shannon Dunn, who had already solidified her spot first event of the season. So between Kelly, Gretchen, and myself, it was gnarly because we're like really good friends, living together, riding together. At the end of it, it just came down to like who didn't ride the shittiest. Because you're sort of breaking down mentally, right? Like all this focus on just making the team. Kelly was just like on this upward trajectory. And Gretchen and I are just like, we are sucking harder, but I am sucking less than you right now. And I made it by like the 10th of the 10th of the 10th or whatever, like just beat her out. And it was really cool experience to share with your friend. And she had a similar experience to what I had in 98, where you're just like the monkey's off the back. Let's just snowboard for the fun of it. And then she won a silver in 2006.
Cool. So you have that Olympics, and what's the Olympic experience like? Is it something where you're super proud to be American when you go there? Because when I talk to athletes, they're like, yeah, it's amazing actually when you walk into those opening ceremonies, something just overtakes you and you feel that Olympic moment. Did you feel that, or is that just some cheesy shit people are saying?
No, I think especially in 2002, because it was right after 9/11 and in the US, and they like walked in with the flag from the World Trade Center.
Yeah.
And it was really, really powerful, and it felt really important. Not like we're super important, but it just felt like you were representing this sort of a mourning nation on home soil. And right after 9/11, it's like, is this going to happen?
Yeah.
You know, like, are we going to host an Olympics in our country? Like, are we safe? Because when you're snowboarding or free skiing or whatever, you don't think of your competitors as like, you're from Norway, you're from Sweden. You're just like, you're this person, you're that person. We're all competing here. It's less about countries. And then when you like roll into the Olympic stage, you're dressed like a kook from America in your kooky outfit, yes, and they've got their kooky things or whatever. Like, we're wearing berets. Why? I don't know. But you feel sort of a national pride in a cool way because you never have that at any other time. And I don't feel like this community isn't so drawn to stuff like that, especially back in that day where you siphon yourself off by like team or nation or whatnot. So it was kind of cool to try it on. You got your American flag on.
Yeah, collared American flag shirt. It's the last thing I've cleaned from this road trip. I love this country. Not as much as I used to, but I really do love it. So you have that special feeling. How does the event go for you there?
My whole goal in going to the Olympics, especially because it was so challenging to make it, and also watching everybody in 98 feel spit out and bummed out by the 98 Olympics, that I was like, I'm going to go there and have the most fun ever. And it was awesome. Like, competing was amazing.
You have a big crash in practice?
I crashed in practice like days before, not like the day of. Okay. And I like smashed my face. I'd been trying to land this McTwist that I had learned and landed, but hadn't landed in so long. And so I just kept trying it and just...
Yeah, might as well break it out for the Olympic run if you haven't landed it.
I know, right? I just wanted to have the most fun and enjoy every piece of it because it's hard to get there.
Do you know that's your last Olympics, or are you going to try to make a run for it afterwards?
Oh, yeah. I didn't think it was my last Olympics, but no one ever does. They're like, oh, I'm here next time when I come next year in 4 years. But I just knew that I needed to just enjoy it and not let the stress of everyone else's expectations and your own expectations taint it. So it was awesome.
Nice. 2006 is when you start working for Octagon, a real job, and you also have your athlete career as well because you're still traveling and competing. With this job, do you have the corporate card? Do you have taken kids out for dinners and stuff like that too? Is it a different experience there as well?
I'm sure I could have done all that stuff, but I just didn't. I had all the benefits of a corporate job without really knowing that I had all the benefits like you do when you become an adult and you're like, oh, I had so many opportunities there that I just turned down. But yeah, it was super cool. Like, I'm grateful to Peter for everything and all the guys at Octagon because it was an awesome opportunity to stay in the sport. Like, I tried to make the 2006 team and I didn't make it. And so I went to the 2006 Olympics, and then that's where he's kind of like, you should come work for me.
You went as a spectator?
Yeah. I had some sponsor obligations at the Olympics and then just hung out and like supported Gretchen and Kelly and my friends. And that was awesome too.
So that puts you into Octagon.
Yeah. So that kind of at that Olympics, they were growing their roster of employees and it just was a perfect timing, perfect fit. Like, I knew I was done snowboarding then, but I was still on the team, I think, for a couple more years.
It's funny. I've talked to a bunch of people. Some people say, I knew I was done snowboarding, so I just got out. I didn't ride it out for a couple more years. But you stayed in for a couple more years, rode out the end of the glory, and then...
I just still really enjoyed the community and family. Let's see, I competed for another 2006,
2009 was your retirement year.
I competed at like X Games in the Open.
Okay.
I don't know. I kind of knew I was winding down.
You're getting old at that point for a snowboarder.
Dude.
A contest snowboarder.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's 15 to 21 is going to win every medal, it seems like.
Well, they're like, oh, you're 22? What are you going to do with your life? You're washed up. Yeah, it was crazy. But I kind of knew I was done. But it gave me the opportunity to enjoy all the things that I think that people that get spit out of the sport or like quit a little early, maybe not early, but they're like go on bad terms.
Yeah.
It gave me the opportunity to like cherish those things, and also bought me some time because I was still like making money doing it, bought me a little bit of time to figure out like next steps.
Do you make a big announcement, or you just kind of step out and walk away and I'm done?
Yeah, I step out, walk away. It's not really my style to like make a big announcement.
Because you see that sometimes.
I know. I think it's cool. I think it's awesome for people to celebrate it. I haven't been one of those people that's like, yo, check me out. I'm doing this now. Which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I didn't. I just was like, thanks, goodbye.
There's only certain people that can do it. If you compete for 3 or 4 years, no one cares. But when you do it for 20 years, it's something where we could take a bow and be like, yeah, I'm done. You're not going to see me anymore.
Yeah.
I'm going to get older now.
I'm going to age miserably.
You've aged great. You've aged great. So then it sounds like you go volunteer with kids in Africa. I don't volunteer for anything, especially with kids. Is that just like go find yourself after snowboarding? Like, I just got to hit the reset button and figure out life?
I don't know. I mean, those trips are always like, oh, I'm volunteering in Africa. But really, you're like going to Africa and having this cool experience that's like very self-focused. Yes, you're doing good, but how much good are you doing in 4 weeks? You know, like handing out books and food and things. That was just an awesome trip and a great experience and an opportunity to like see a different perspective and also to be able to do things that we didn't have time to do while we were competing. But yeah, I don't know if I went and figured anything out over there other than, damn, it's hot. And wow, it's crazy perspective making for sure. Like seeing any other life, especially when you've been living this privileged lifestyle of snowboarding and doing whatever you want, whenever you want, to like see happiness and joy in places that don't have all the things is also really, really cool.
Yeah. So they don't have the Connecticut lifestyle.
Yeah. They weren't going to country clubs and like playing golf. I'm like,
water was a challenge for them.
Totally.
Yeah. I get it. The next big step in your career is go 211, I think.
Oh, go to 11.
The first question about that is who the fuck named something like that?
Oh my God, Danny Cass.
What's he thinking there? Like, hey, I'm going to make something that's hard to search for, hard for people to understand, and not a good name.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that was a chapter. So that came around in the 2006, like Octagon days.
Okay.
And so they were a client of Octagon's, and I was brought on to sort of like help manage what their needs were with the athletes that worked with Octagon. A social networking action sports site is what they wanted to be. And then we brought on like Jeff Greenwood, who's a filmer and webcaster. And we just started webcasting all of the major events in snowboarding.
And then you get to become an athlete who doesn't have to perform. You go around and you talk about people.
Yeah.
And that's pretty amazing.
It was so amazing and so fun. And it felt really cool. And webcasting in 2006, 7, 8, 9 is like early days.
You and Chris Cote.
Totally. But yeah, it was really cool and a really crazy experience because it was all basically fraud, I think, in the end.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was built off of a lot of promises. We had this unlimited budget and we had millions of viewers, but then you're like, those are all robots and that money actually doesn't really exist.
Oh, man.
So I learned a ton and we had a great run, but then I think it just blew up.
At the height of it, I guess if you're getting fake numbers, do you have any real data on how many people were watching your webcast?
No idea.
Huh, that sucks.
Yeah, but it's just like, we have 1 million uniques a day. You're like, well, then why are there no comments? Things like that. Everyone's like, explain the math to me. I'm like, I would love to, but I don't know it. That was sort of before everything was botted out, like in social media now, where you're like, I have 50,000 followers, but I get 35 likes a photo. You're like, math is not my strong suit, but let me tell you, that is wrong.
And is it startup culture money? You feel like you guys have everything?
Yes.
That's fun.
It was fun. I learned so much. And it was, like you said, like being able to be on tour without having to show up and drop in. And like the first event I went to that I didn't compete at, I just remember waking up in the morning and being like, thank you.
No nerves.
Relief. Yeah. Or just like, God, it's 8 a.m. and I haven't been up for an hour and a half trying to go to the half, like women, starting at the crack of dawn and all that. I was doing both Octagon and working for Go to 11 at the same time. And then I basically chose to work for Go to 11.
Okay.
And do the webcasting and all that for a couple of years. And then it kind of exploded.
From there, you do a lot of freelance stuff. You run the USASA, I believe. So you're in the grassroots marketing of the sport and building the future of the sport. What else are you doing?
Now?
Yeah, now.
Yeah, I do a lot of freelance stuff. I work with USASA, so that's like going right back to the roots. Like Green Mountain Series is basically like a USASA event now.
That's how competitors come up.
Yeah. So it's like the first step in the Olympic pipeline. And so we're working with 5 to 75-year-olds out there on the hill. There's 32 series and kids are competing every weekend, and it's been really cool. I work in the marketing with them, and it's just like an awesome full circle on the sport to kind of like come back to it. Because I feel like when you work at the elite level, like I worked with the US team as a press officer for a couple of years, and you're at these like X Games or Grand Prix, and the stoke level of the athlete, they're so talented, but yet they're just like bib, meh, swag, meh, don't care, where's my stuff? Did you grab my backpack or not? And then you go to this lower level, the next generation, and they're like at the USASA Nationals in Copper every year, they're like wearing their bibs 24/7. They're like, look at this amazing one kind bar I got in my bag. You know, everything feels so precious and amazing. And I guess after the 2018 Olympics, we brought a bunch of like Chloe, Kim, and Kyle Mack, and those guys all came back, and we did a big panel in front of the young athletes with the Olympians. And Kyle's like, this feels like the US Open feels to me now. You know, coming to the USASA Nationals was like such a big deal. I don't know. It's just cool to be a part of that process in that pipeline, to see kids stoked for the first time and feeling like that's their big moment.
Yeah. When you're a pro, you expect it. You get there and you expect, I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to do that. But when you're on that level, it's, I want to do this, I want to do that.
And it's where all those communities are built. Like half the friends I have now from snowboarding, it's like I met them at nationals when I was 14 or 15, and we went and rode powder and, you know, snuck off and did whatever. And it's just cool to see that sort of continuing on. There's way more parents involved, but it's still cool.
Nice. Well, at this point in the show, I have something that I call inappropriate questions.
Great.
Yeah, they're not bad because I sometimes have someone who knows you ask the inappropriate questions. I talked to no one else, really. I was at the Red Bull Proving Grounds yesterday. There's a guy named Spencer Harkins. He's one of my favorite people in action sports, period. He's got the greatest sense of humor, funniest dude. And I said, hey, you don't know this girl at all. I don't even know if you were alive when she was born.
That's awesome.
But you're going to ask her 3 inappropriate questions. He's an inappropriate guy.
Okay.
I need to pull them up, which is always the challenge here. Let's see if I can find question number 1 from Spencer.
Why do women skiers go bigger than women snowboarders in the halfpipe?
That is not true. It's true for the male snowboarders, but the women skiers do not go bigger than the female snowboarders. It's kind of crazy because I've had this thought in my head, like, if the men are going so much bigger on skis, why are the women going so much smaller? Like, I watched the Olympics and that one woman.
Oh, she was so good. Yeah. I was so proud of her.
For everyone.
Elizabeth Swanee.
Is that the one from Hungary?
The one who sucked.
Yeah.
That you were better than on skis?
Yeah. But they should be going bigger than us because they have more edges and they have more edge control and they can land in a freaking, with their back on the ground and get up and skate and go bigger. So it's not true. And tell me why it's not true. Why are those girls not going bigger than snowboarders?
I think that's a question that you need to ask each one of those girls.
Here's where it gets uncomfortable.
Yeah. You do make a point that if the guys are going bigger on skis, why aren't the girls? Because the tools do create the ability to get more speed and the ability to have a bigger sweet spot to land. So,
and Cassie Sharp goes big, but I feel like there needs to be a big push in halfpipe.
Well, skiers, you heard it here from a legendary snowboarder. You need to fucking step it up.
I think they can.
Yeah, it's totally possible. We're going to go with question number 2 before I get myself in trouble.
Sorry.
It's all right.
How often does it burn, and if so, from where?
I guess he's asking if you've ever had something.
That burned?
Yeah.
No.
Good for you.
Well, that's not true. I'm fairly pale, and so I get a lot of sunburns quite easily. It's so funny, the burns thing, because no one ever says anything about it.
That was the first thing I thought.
I know, it's hilarious. Like, yeah.
Let's go with our final inappropriate question.
Of all the times you've been dropped by your sponsors, what is the story that's most Pit Viper worthy?
He's asking what's the most ridiculous thing that a sponsor has dropped you for. You probably haven't done anything that a sponsor would think like, oh, we can't have her part of the program because that's
like
not right.
That, like totally inappropriate where I like fucked myself by doing something terrible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nothing?
No.
You ever been arrested?
No.
Okay, just asking.
So boring.
It's all right. Inappropriate questions don't always work. I mean, we've done like 138 of these, and they've worked 137 times, so they didn't work this time. But it's quite all right. Tricia, I want to thank you for your time. 20 years as a competitive athlete. You are still involved in the industry and making the dreams of young children come true with the USASA and all the other freelance stuff you do. Thank you for having me at your house.
I'm so boring. Come back. I'll be more fun.
So that was time with Tricia Byrnes, and what a career she's had. I guess if you look at her career, it's been such a rocky road, but she doesn't make it seem like that. Between losing her brother and not winning medals at the most important events in her sport, she does not give a fuck. And why would she? She's won a ton of events and made a great life out of sliding on snow. That's the show for this week. Now I want to ask you to review me on whatever platform you listen to me on. If you're on an iPhone, here's what you need to do. Hit the podcast icon, search for the Powell Movement, click on my logo, scroll down to where you see 5 stars, click 5 stars, and you're done. It takes about 20 seconds and it's greatly appreciated. I also ask you to support my great sponsors. They are Evo, Stanley, Spy Optic, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Thank you for listening and have a great week, everyone.